At the unknown sources of deep Africa, a river begins its long journey, brought by rains and distant mountains. This river, called the Nile, will not ceremonial voyages, cementing its role as the backbone of the country. In the Egyptian imagination, the Nile was to famine and conflict. On the other hand, excessive flooding could wipe out villages and crops. This delicate balance between order and chaos was reflected in Egyptian religion and politics, where the pharaoh was seen as the guarantor of the Ma'at. The secrets and wonders of history in Untold History. Thank you for joining us.